So welcome to today's Zoom call. The reason for sitting down today is really to start talking about cocooning a business. So what we're going to do is start by just looking at what is cocooning and why would a business do this. Some principles to follow, how we can maximize cash inflows and outflows to keep everything ticking over, and then just some other considerations as we get towards the end today. So cocooning, or as some people call it, mothballing your business, is really just the suspension of your business. Now, the key reason which would be implicated today is result of sales reducing to zero or nearly zero, which for some businesses in the current economic climate may be quite likely. For others, it might be that things have just got down to a point that it's just not really cost effective to be continuing. So that's what we're kind of talking about today. And really the general principle is, can we get all our cash outflows reduced, stopped, left in a state that when things do improve, when business conditions are in a position where they can actually kind of get going, pick up speed again, that we're ready to kind of emerge from this period, which obviously a cocoon like a butterfly or as moths do. So why would you consider doing this? You might think this seems counterintuitive. Well, it's really quite a pragmatic step. It's something that we just consider to try and make it so it's going to work for you in your business. It can often help delay having to actually make a decision. Now, at the moment, we've got about 3 months of probably uncertainty. March was a bit uncertain. April, we're kind of midway through, and we've still kind of got May and June where there's still quite a bit of uncertainty with where we're going to be going, especially with in the current economic climate, the government looking at extending the furlough scheme till the end of June. So we're kind of saying at the moment for most businesses that up to the end of June, there is still quite a lot of uncertainty out there. Now, when you're making this decision, you do just need to have a look at a few things moving forward. So where are you in the supply chain? Are you delivering straight to your customer, or are you kind of partway through somewhere in the middle, and you stopping doing something will have an impact on others in the supply chain? We've also got the question of, what are your expected revenues? Have you got work lined up that you can still do, or has all your work dried up so it's not worth it? I know recently I've had conversations with people where they're saying, well, I've got a few bits and pieces, but the question is it worth doing those bits and pieces or not? Or is there any way of delaying those so you can kind of reduce everything down for a period of time and then do those bits of work? Now, what I would probably be saying to most people is to start having a look at the financial forecast. So we will be doing something on forecasting soon. And really that is showing what it would be looking like if you cocooned the business. So if you did look at cutting costs, look at the reduced income stream, and what it would look like if you're still staying open and trading, if that is actually a possibility at the moment. Now, they may look pretty similar, which is where the decision actually might become a little bit easier to go down the route of cocooning a business rather than continuing to trade if things are looking very similar. The end point, therefore, comes the longer term financial forecasting, where you're looking at, well, we need to kind of close down for a couple of months. How do you come out of that? Now, for some, where it's maybe more labor intensive work, or you're kind of putting things together yourself, you may be able to come out of it relatively quickly as soon as the work starts to happen again. The only delay you may have is getting the right supplies for the type of work you're doing, because obviously we are reliant at times on our wholesalers, on the people that we're using their services, so it may be delayed by them being stocked up sufficient, or they may just be sitting on stock at the moment, waiting for things to kick off again. If you're more stock reliant, or you're maybe a service industry for, say, like a restaurant, now obviously as soon as restrictions are removed, there may still be some restrictions on our movement for a period of time, and on that basis it's not going to be, they say you can open tomorrow, you open tomorrow. You've still got to get your products, you've got to get your staff back in, you've got to make sure that the environment's fit for purpose. If it's not been cleaned for, say, 3 months, you may need to get cleaners in, you may need to get the ovens checked, you may need to be doing different things like this. So it might take a week or two before you can actually even open the doors to your customers. So different businesses will have a different emergence plan, a plan to get your business back up and running after this period where things have been cocooned or mothballed for a period of time. For anyone who doesn't know whether they are actually going to be able to get out of the position that they're in, it may be that it just delays the decision that actually closing the business down completely may be the right decision for you. Now, you may be able to delay this by a couple of months and not have to make the decision now. However, it's something to just consider and have a look at to see when, if this is the direction things are taking, when you may need to consider this. Obviously, these sorts of things take advice, so talk to one of the team, or if it's at a point where it's a slightly larger business, it may be we need to be talking to insolvency practitioners to arrange the appropriate things in place to get things moving in that direction. Now, there's a few main things to consider when we're looking at cocooning. First one is prioritizing. Focus on the biggest costs first, and those that are critical to the future. So biggest costs, depending on your business, may be things like rent, it may be staff, it may be you've got contracts in place with people that you've agreed to pay a certain amount for services that you just don't need at the moment. And then you can work down to the smaller things, the bits that probably are slightly more insignificant, but if you can postpone, delay, defer, there's lots of different bits. Communicate. Now, this is with all the relevant stakeholders. It may not be good news, it may be bad news, but at least if you're communicating, letting them know where the story is, where you are, they feel that they're part of it, and you've not just made a decision out of the blue and just say stop paying them. You've actually come to a decision, say at the moment this is what we can do, this is where we're going, this is our plan. Hopefully you can work with us on it, and we look forward to working with you as things kind of improve in the future. Negotiate. Now, for every single business, we're in a very unprecedented period of time. So people are more willing to negotiate now than they've probably ever been willing to negotiate. I know we've got clients with rent, and the main thing is if you can't afford your rent, talk to your landlord. Don't just stop paying, because that creates bad blood. Talk to them, tell them your situation, come to an agreement with them, make sure that everything works through. Anyone and everyone you can talk to negotiate and make agreements with, that will help improve the position as you emerge in the future, and it will give credibility to what you're saying based on where you want to see yourself. Thinking long term. You don't really want to be stopping paying people, just stopping. I'd probably be saying you want to stop paying people, but you want to have communicated with them. You want to have been able to put them in a position so that they know what's happening, for how long, so that when business does go back to a new norm, it's not going to be the same, but it's going to hopefully reflect something similar-ish, if that's even a word, in the future, that you can then start to kind of build those relationships, build that trust back up. But hopefully you've not lost that trust, because you've taken that long-term view. You've looked at where are you going, and how do you get there? So at the moment, the first step is going to be maximising any cash inflow. Now, if anybody owes you any money, let's get that money in now. Let's try and speak to them. If they can't pay now, what arrangements can you put in place? Can they pay you a small month amount for the next 3 months? which means the cash is moving into your bank account, which is covering any of the costs you may not be able to remove from your business. Do you have stock? Can you sell that stock? Obviously, if you're selling stock, you need to watch out for the fact that when you do get going again, will you need that stock to be able to get going? So you may need to get rid of excess stock, but not necessarily all the stock that you have got. If you're eligible for any of the government schemes, such as statutory sick pay, which covers 2 weeks of sick pay from any of your team members, that may be one way to go. Now, we do have more details available, so if there is things you're not sure of what you can claim, do let us know. Now, for any businesses that have premises, there are grants available. We've got small business grants of 10k, some slightly larger grants for 25k, and we've also got our business rates document, which is basically saying that you can actually get these deferred till later in the year, and the councils are trying to help businesses as far as possible. Now, some of these grants are available for all businesses, like the small business grant. So anyone who has got any sort of premises, there is these grants available if you're getting the small business rates relief, and there may be 10,000 for you. Any who are slightly larger businesses, this is mainly aimed at retail, hospitality and leisure. Obviously, you may have insurance policies in place. Now, we all have to have insurance in place for our business, but what's covered in that insurance policy? Now, I know there's been a lot of controversial points in terms of what is and what isn't covered, and I know the government have been saying to insurance companies to work with businesses rather than against businesses. The main thing is, if your wording is very specific, you may be limited, but if your wording is quite general and it's pandemic or government ordered closures, you may have some ability to claim there to just get some extra funds into the bank to cover off as you are looking at the cocooning process. Now, you may have customer contracts and things that you have to fulfill. So if you have any that you can't fulfill, there is some contracts which may be covered by the force majeure clause in place if you have got full formal contracts in place. But really, the best thing to do is talk to your customers. What can you deliver? What can't you deliver? What are you willing to deliver? Are kind of the three areas. Obviously, you don't want to be working on, say, a construction site which has 20 other people if you're in a high-risk group, or if you've got high-risk people in your family at home. So it's just really working with these people to try and make everything work so you keep that good relationship for the future. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum from getting as much funds into the business and as many inflows in to kind of help cover the basic costs is really minimizing the cash outflows. So have a look at all your expense lines. What are you paying out? What is leaving the business? And the best place to start, as is always going to be the case, is going to be bank statements. These will show what you're paying out each month, so you can see what are the biggies that you want to start with. Obviously, the largest are the most critical because they're the ones that are going to be reducing the money in the bank and causing the most problems the quickest. It's worth considering that as directors of your businesses, you do have certain responsibilities. So you do need to look at, as you make these decisions, that you are taking them in a proper way. It can't just be a matter of you take the funds out yourself to cover yourself. There is certain duties towards the creditors that take priority. So it's just being fair and reasonable and making sure you're making decisions potentially in the best interest of the company, as well as considering your own personal situation. There is different help out there, so it's just trying to make it work for everyone. So let's have a look at some of the bigger expenses, some of the things that you can be doing to help minimize the cash outflows. Now, the first biggest for most businesses, if you have any people, is the payroll. So the first step is really having a look, can you furlough all your staff? Now, if you're looking at the cocooning process, we're looking at trying to furlough all your staff. which means the business is not going to have to cover any payroll for the period that they allow. Now, the coronavirus job retention scheme process, using this scheme, you can furlough all of your staff, and that's probably the most relevant point to do. Key things, it's for a minimum of 3 weeks. They can't do any work for the business during that time. It does include yourself. You can still do your director's duties. You just can't generate any income for the business during that period. Now, this will cover 80% of their salaries, plus national insurance and plus the pension for the minimum period. And we are looking at that being available up to the end of June at this point. The application process is open today, so on that basis, things are starting to move, and we'll be doing some more information out there on this as we start to see how this is actually working, as like everyone else, today is the first day we've actually seen how it functions. In terms of other options, if some staff or directors need to be kept on the payroll, their salary can be reduced, or you could reduce their hours, use some of their holiday. The final kind of position with any cocooning sort of process is going to be down the redundancy route, that if you don't foresee the business being able to retain them after the furlough period, then potentially it's whether you actually make them redundant before the end of the furlough period and go down that route rather than a furloughing position. Obviously, in making someone redundant, that does reduce your ability going forward to be able to deliver your services when you do get back up and running. So it's just making sure that you've got things in place on the assumption that this is just for a short period and you're going to be back up and running shortly. If you're seeing things are going in a downward facing direction, that you're maybe not going to get up and running at the end of the day, then redundancy may be the right option to be considering. So rent tends to be one of the next biggest expenses. So first thing is stop paying your rent. However, do communicate with your landlord. It's really important that you keep a good relationship with them. Hopefully they will be reasonable. They are still human beings. After all, they are individuals who they are facing their own issues at this point in time. So it is a matter of just trying to work with them to find a route that is going to work for all parties. And as necessary, you can take advantage of the government's creditor moratorium, which is basically saying up until the 30th of June, you're protected. They cannot evict you if you fail to make payment as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. The only thing to note, it doesn't cover your service charges, it doesn't cover other leasehold costs. So if you have got those, it may be you need to have a chat with the people you're paying for those to try and again negotiate some sort of position to help get your business in a position where it can cover whatever expenses, and look at how you're going to do it when you come out of this cocooned position and go back to full trading. Now, obviously, when you're communicating with your landlord, if you have been a good tenant in the past, it's literally this that has just kind of created the issue, then arguably you are going to be a good tenant moving forward. So this is just kind of a cash flow situation, and it's something that's happening now. Landlords are in a similar position to you. They may be struggling themselves. So it's just really trying to have a constructive conversation, retain that good relationship. And we are seeing landlords that are agreeing holidays, deferrals, different things. So it's really just kind of trying to work with them to find the best outcome for all parties. Now, the rate side of things, we are looking at stop paying them. Like most of the suggestions here, stop paying them. The government is giving different business rates, holidays for certain types of business, so that may help your business. If it doesn't, they are doing deferrals, they are delaying things. So certain bits where you may still have to pay your rates, you may be able to start paying in July, August, when hopefully things are starting to move again, rather than having to pay during this period. Main thing, speak to the councils early. You may be able to put in electronic messages to them rather than the phone calls, because I know some people are struggling to get through on the phone with some of these things. It's maybe taking an hour to get through on the phone to different organisations. So let's move on to some tax and HMRC areas. So the VAT side of things, firstly, they have done deferrals of VAT payments. So that means you can cancel your direct debits. You don't have to pay for the VAT for this quarter, and that is in place till the end of June, meaning any VAT that is due for payment in that time period doesn't need to be paid. However, it still means that you need to submit your VAT return. It doesn't mean you don't have to submit it, you just don't have to pay it. If you have a refund, they are still being paid out. So the key thing here is do your VAT, calculate it, send it in, and if you do have something to pay, you can cancel that payment. Now, if your cash flow is looking fine, then you might have left it. However, if we're looking at cocooning to reduce the business expenses, we need to kind of be cutting as many expenses out as possible. For this one, you don't need to tell HMRC, it's an automatic election. They're not going to penalise you if you do not pay for this time period. For all other taxes, so we're talking corporation tax, PAYE, anything like this, you need to give the tax office a call or use their chat function, which we found is actually working quite well. And you can get through to an advisor quite quickly on their chat feature. HMRC have the power to defer things if they think it is fair and reasonable to. So this could be deferral for 2-3 months. This could be setting up a payment plan. It might be deferral, and then at the end of the deferral period, you set up a payment plan. There is a few different options available. So what we're saying is when you're looking at cocooning your business and kind of mothballing it as far as possible, get these things set up, put the dates in your diary to forward note when you need to be looking at things, and then it just means hopefully that's less cash outflow out the business and you can look at moving things forward. Other creditors, loans that you might have, speak to your lender and agree to new terms. Most banks, most lenders are being relatively reasonable. If they've got the appropriate security in place anyway, it should not be a problem. It is really just trying to look at things like repayment holidays, whether they can waive covenant points. So for certain businesses, they may not be able to get other loans while they've got an existing loan. See if they can do a waiver on that for a short period of time so that you can get appropriate funding to cover any of the required expenses of the business. Extend the loan term. It may be you can push things further back, which therefore reduces payments, which may help with the cocooning of the business because you are reducing the outflows as significantly as possible. Similar with your hiring and leasing, where possible, stop payment, communicate with them and see what you can do during this time period. Options for things like benefits in kind, that employees can pass the vehicle back and make it unavailable, so they're not going to be getting the tax benefit. Whether you can do that with your lease companies, again, it will come down to negotiating and communicating with them to see what options they have available during this time period. Other creditors, again, it's really just that key communication. Speak to them, stop the payments. Each of them may be on a case by case. If it's to another small business, they may not be able to do anything. For large businesses, hopefully they will be able to do a little bit more if they've got sufficient reserves in their place. So here we've just got examples of things like retainers, recruitment, advertising, marketing, maintenance, capex can all be stopped. So if you're literally going down to a kind of minimum cost to keep things ticking over, these are kind of some of the areas to really start to focus in on keeping those cash outflows down to an absolute minimum. Financing support. If you are looking at cocooning the business, it may not be appropriate to go and get a business interruption loan if you are not going to be generating any income at all. You're looking at cutting costs completely. If there are costs that you cannot cover, that you need some support with, there are different banks available, and some high street banks are providing some support and others are less likely. First port of call would be your bank. Have a word with them, see what they can offer, see what they can do for you to see if they can help, whether that's by offering you an overdraft which just ties you over for the next month or two, whether it's an actual agreed loan where you've got monthly repayments. It's really just kind of finding what is going to be the right solution for you at the time, depending how many months you're looking at cocooning and mothballing the business for. Some other considerations that you may just need to consider. From a self-employment income support scheme, this is only relevant if you are not within your own company. If you are self-employed, you may be able to get some support through this scheme. If you're on your own payroll and got no self-employed income, this is irrelevant. You're looking at the furlough scheme, and it's just making sure that you are taking that if it's appropriate to do so. If you've got self-assessment payments due at the end of July, you can now defer them to January. So hopefully for anyone that might have a payment at the end of July, it just pushes it back slightly, and touch wood, we are back in business. Things are flowing a bit better by the end of January next year. For universal credit, we have got fact sheets on how to make claims if you personally or any of your employees may need support and assistance. Obviously for staff, if their income is just reduced to the 80% furlough, it may be that they can make a claim under the universal credits scheme if they're needing additional support. And again, for yourselves, if you're receiving just direct salaries, it may be something that you can consider depending what your savings are. The limits start at about 6,000 savings and 16,000 savings. If you go over those, it does restrict what you can claim. However, if what you have in savings is to pay your tax bill, you may be able to reduce that out of your actual savings, and the taxman will look at that and go, yes, that isn't included because it's for taxes, and on that basis we will be able to make some sort of claim under that scheme. For accounting periods, it may be beneficial to shorten your accounting period to bring forward any losses which may result in corporation tax refunds. So this could be something beneficial to get money back into your pocket sooner. The alternative is you may want to extend the period so you don't have to do anything at this point in time, and it can be pushed back to later in the year when you've got funds in place to be dealing with that side of the administrative duties that you have in place. There's a couple of options there depending where you fit in. The main one is trying to get money back in your pocket. The secondary one is trying to push back any tax payments that may be due. So it kind of depends what position the business is in. Obviously, if you do need to do something, it's not to be ignored. There are certain delays that companies' house are allowing, and there's the time to pay scheme for any corporation tax or self-assessment that's due. So on that basis, there is schemes there available to hopefully help get you through this challenging time. Staff working from home. If you are getting people working from home, they can claim additional costs incurred or use the flat rate of £6 per week if the employer is able to pay it. Now, this is very dependent on your cash flow as a business owner to look at whether that would be an appropriate position to be in. Now, one thing that we just need to highlight is something that directors do need to be aware of, which is the concept of wrongful trading. Now, wrongful trading is where the directors of a company continue to trade where there's basically no reasonable prospect of being able to pay the people that they're working with. Now, on that basis, this is where directors become personally liable. Now, we did have a relaxation of these rules on the 28th of March, meaning that for the 3 months, the wrongful trading provisions are suspended. So where a business may be near insolvency, you can continue trading, incur liabilities with no threat of personal liabilities, but you do need to be aware of the Companies Act 2006, where directors need to act in the best interest of the creditors, especially where there's a heightened risk of insolvency. So you potentially say at the minute, at times, there may be a heightened risk. Really, to protect you, the business, the key thing is looking at your cash flows, looking at your business plans, really making sure you've got things documented. So where you are making decisions with the information available at hand, make a note, put it down, send yourself an email, record it so you know what happened and why you did something at that point in time. Obviously, with the changing circumstances, things might have changed in a day, in an evening, in a week, in 2 weeks. So things do change, but if you know why you've made that decision at the time, then you've got why did you do it at that point, and then you go, oh, the decision was changed because this happened. This funding may have been available or something else happened, so we went down this route instead. So on that basis, there is a lot available there to the different areas. So let me just cover some final thoughts before we go into any questions that we may have today. It's quite a big decision if you do decide that cocooning, mothballing the business is the right thing to do. So we are there if there is any questions you've got, if you want some support, please do give us a call and we can arrange a call to just chat through to make sure you're on top of the different things. The main focus really is trying to stop all costs. Ideally at the moment till the end of June, now that we know that things are probably going to be in a similar position at that point with where we are with government announcements. It just buys you a bit of time to kind of make a decision when we know more information, when we know, yes, something's going to be happening, we know where we can go with things, when we can open, when we can't open. For those that are very customer focused businesses, it obviously becomes very problematic if you can't be within 2 meters of your customers. For other businesses, that's not a problem because it's all computer, phone calls, things like that. It may just be you've got no work and it's not the issue of social distancing that's the issue. So there's a few different areas that as things do get back to the new norm, that may have how you get trading, how you get going again, may have an impact. One thing is document your decisions, which hopefully then will mean whatever advice you've taken, whatever decisions you've made, they were the right things at the right time. And on that basis, there's no one that can come back to you to throw in wrongful trading or enforce creditor terms on the basis that what was decided at the time was based on the right advice, the right decision with what you had at that time available to you. So hopefully that gives you a bit more of an idea of kind of cocooning your business if you're looking at kind of shutting it down to a bare minimum, and some of the things that you kind of need to be considering from the shorter term of what is happening over the next couple of months through to re-emergence as the business can get back up and running as we find out more of the information. So that leads me on to ourselves and what can we do, how can we help. If you are needing to talk to someone to just make sure you're making the right decisions, give us a call, we can have a chat just to make sure that you're kind of happy, you considered all the different options. If you're needing to do forecasts or anything like that, have a word with us, we can help with that side of things to just make sure that you are on the ball with making sure you've considered the different pieces of the puzzle. We will be having some more calls on different areas, so keep an eye out for any of the other calls that you may find of interest to just share the different things. We'll be having something on furloughing applications shortly, and we'll probably be doing something on maybe cash flows and that side of things as well. So that leaves me to say a thank you for joining me today. And if anyone's got any questions, please do feel free to put them on the chat box on your screen, and we can answer any of those before we finish up today. So I'll just leave it another minute before we finish. If there is anything anyone wants to ask about, there will be a recording. There has been a recording of today's video, so we will be sending that out onto our YouTube channel shortly. So if you've missed the beginning or want to have a listen through to any of the other bits, then please do feel free. And then also we'll be sending a link out with the slides as well, so you can kind of have a look through if there was any bits that you were trying to make notes on that we couldn't take any further notes because I went too quickly at any point. Okay, well at that, can I claim for April payroll even though the month is not finished? Based on what I have seen, the answer is probably potentially. I think if you know what your payroll is going to be, it can be ran earlier than normal, which therefore means that it'll be ran, your RTI will go in, which therefore means you can put the claim in and put the claim in for any March pay and any April pay as well, and do one claim which covers both the months depending what date you had to close down. So the main thing is make sure you know what you are going to be paying for. Payroll can get run and submitted. Obviously that hopefully may mean that you can get the money back in from the furlough claim before you have to potentially try and make any payments out to the team, which I know we've got a few businesses that are a little cash strapped with trying to make those payments. From the claim that they have done, they have said on the claim, having looked at it this morning, when you've submitted it, they'll check their records on the PAYE scheme, and then the payment should be made within 6 days. So anything going through now should potentially be with the business by beginning of next week. So if your April payroll is not normally ran till the end of the month, but you're ready to go, let's get it ran, let's get it gone. And on that basis, it should mean that the claim can go in and the money can be with you as soon as possible to help finance that side of the business. Okay. Well, at that, if there's no more questions, I will wish you all a good afternoon. Enjoy the rest of this nice weather if you have got some free time, or I'll let you get back to work for anyone who is still working. And look forward to talking to you all soon to keep you updated with the current happenings.